everyone. Thanks again for joining us at the 2024 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Isabella DiDio, and I'm a first-year LGO MBA student at MIT Sloan. It is my pleasure to introduce our panel, In the Limelight, Investing in the Future of Women's Sports, presented by Wasserman. Our panelists today are Julie Ehrman, president and co-founder of Angel City Football Club, Monica McNutt, MBA, WNBA, and college basketball analyst at ESPN, Thayer Lavielle, executive vice president of The Collective at Wasserman, and Susie Petrowski, vice president of women's sports programming and ESPNW at ESPN. Our panel will be moderated by Justine Brown, VP of Creative Development and Talent Relations at Together. The panel will run for 45 minutes, and we will leave 10 minutes at the end for questions. Please submit questions via our Cadence app. You can navigate to this panel via the schedule pane, and in the menu, navigate to the In the Limelight panel. Questions can be submitted in that event, and they will be selected by the moderator. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Justine. Thank you.
So much pressure. Woo! I get to select the question. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm on the stage with 4 people who have things on their resume that I hope to have on mine by the time it's all said and done. Maybe with the exception of Division I basketball. The way my back felt when I woke up, I think those dreams might be dead. But first of all, thank you guys for being here. I'm really excited about this conversation. We have a very enthusiastic group, so we'll get right into it. I wanted to start, being that our topic today is investing in the future of women's sports, by reading this stat. Historically, women's sports has received 3 to 5.5% of media coverage compared to men's sports, but a recent report from Wasserman's The Collective, and in partnership with ESPN Research, demonstrates a notable uptick of 15% in 2022. And my friend Thayer here told me yesterday they updated that to 16% in 2023. So to get started, Thayer, can you tell us, first of all, a little bit about The Collective and a little bit about this exact report and the findings that came with it?
Yes. Thanks, and it's, what esteemed company to be in, so a pleasure to be here, and can't see any of you, so I hope you're out there. So The Collective is Wasserman's women's practice. We sit at the center of the company in terms of between our talent division, which represents entertainers, athletes, and artists, and then our consulting division, which does everything from brand strategy, research and insights, partner management, negotiation, creative, experiential, measurement, all of that. And we really sit in between those, looking at all parts of the business through the lens of women and how to advance their power, how to advocate for them, how to create research and advocacy around pushing for women, but also how do you do that through brands, properties, and talent so that it goes even farther and wider. We don't believe that we're the sole solution to that. We actually think that it's way more powerful when you're working through a big brand or when you're working through big talent to be able to go push that. So that was part of the research that we did with ESPN, was looking at this 4% stat that has been out there for so long. I don't think after 30 years we thought it was necessarily as relevant as it was, just because the methodology had been really focused on linear in specific day parts, in specific markets, during specific times of the year, and we felt like there was a lot more dynamism around social media, and that wasn't even invented when this report had started first, to digital, was that nascent, to streaming, which wasn't around. So we really went in and looked at the methodology and said we feel like there can be a new way to look at how people are engaging in women's sport and what coverage is there. And through the incredible team of Wasserman, and led by Amy Johnson and Cooper Kavanaugh and Shelley Pissarra, they really went into 1.2 billion lines of data and analyzed all of these different elements to come out with, it's actually more like 15%. But the interesting part about that, or 16 now for 2023, which is exciting, the interesting part about that, because you can still say, well, it's 16%. What we realized, though, is that when looking at the number of competitions, Division I athletics, 53% of all athletic competitions are actually women's competitions. That's amazing.
Outstanding.
Outstanding.
Yeah, give it up for that.
But when you get to professional competitions, only 8% of competitions are women's competitions. Why? Because you just don't have enough competitions. You don't have enough teams, enough leagues, enough ways for women to graduate. So you have a huge volleyball tournament here today, and where are these women going to go? Now there's one professional league, there's another one coming out in the fall. That's amazing. What else? What else? There's Athletes Unlimited. Like, where else can these women start to go participate? And with that comes more coverage. So hopefully that number will continue to go up. That's in the US. International is a wholly different story, which we can get into.
Thayer has set up every topic we are going to hit on, so we're going to go a few different places.
My work here is done.
Not like she does this every day or anything. I'm going to start with Susie, being that this was in partnership with ESPN Research. You're at ESPN. Can you talk about how you've taken this research and built it into the women's programming, built it into taking it from linear broadcast to social media, and how it's evolved the landscape there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm relatively new in this role, certainly by ESPN standards. I've been at the company for about a year and a half, and candidly, I took this job because I really kind of felt like, if not us, who? From a live rights standpoint, we certainly are leaders in the space. And we are, I often say this, and now I've kind of disseminated this talking point with all of my colleagues, but this isn't a moment, this is a movement. We have all of these live rights. How are we going to continue to grow, continue to develop the ecosystem? What does that look like horizontally across the enterprise? So you alluded to kind of streaming. We just renewed our NCAA deal, 8 years, and we are kind of home to college women's athletics and championships, and we see that disproportionately, of course, on ESPN+, but you're seeing now more than ever, we're about to head into March Madness, and I expect us to see the unprecedented numbers, just like we did last year and just like we did the year before. So I'm very fortunate to also be able to kind of say, what does our strategy look like moving forward? Women's sports are sports, and we are the worldwide leader in sports. We're going to continue to discuss, debate, analyze women's sports in all of our most important spaces. We're going to make experts out of our experts. I'm fortunate to sit alongside people like Monica and Elle Duncan and Andrea Carter and all of these women who kind of have made women's sports part of their destination. So how do we take advantage of the live rights we have and make sure not only showing up in the most important spaces that are already well established at ESPN, but also create mile deep spaces? Just like we have NFL Live, what do our mile deep spaces look like to help build the ecosystem around women's sports? That, of course, will include streaming, linear, potentially studio, social, all of the things, all of the levers in which we get to push and pull and take advantage of at ESPN. We'll certainly continue to do so adjacent to women's sports.
You took me to the hard question that I was going to ask you, or the pressure question I was going to ask you. How long do you think until we see a studio show that's around women's sports?
You know what? I'd like to say not particularly long, but even more than that, I think that's a question that I get often, and this is, I welcome that. Bring the heat. Again, it's why I took this job, because again, if not us, who? But who disproportionately is engaging with women's sports? A younger audience, Gen Z, a much more diverse audience. Are they engaging with linear as kind of older generations? To a degree, but how can we develop kind of franchises in our footprint, digital first, social first, so we can make sure that we're reaching that young audience that's going to come with us? So certainly kind of a priority to make sure that we're building that ecosystem around women's sports. Will it exclusively exist on linear? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's the actual best place for kind of sustainable scale and growth, but certainly a very core priority for me.
Awesome. Monica, you sit at ESPN on screen. We see you talk about the game all the time, but you started playing the game, Georgetown in the house.
Whoop, whoop. Yeah.
I know, she had to come out.
Okay. PG County?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Stand up. Come on, Justine, I like your research.
I pay attention. So since your time playing within the last, 10 to 15 years, let's just say, we'll give it a window, to now covering the sport, can you talk about how you felt the tangible growth?
Man, so I think, what is it, we're 3 years now removed from the scandal around the NCAA tournament and realizing that March Madness was not even copyrighted when it came to women's sports. I was at ACC Network working, and I remember former head coach, Hall of Famer Muffet McGraw saying, women don't need to just be happy to be here, right? And so I can remember that was very much the sentiment in my playing days. Like, well, I'm going to school for free, like it's great, what do you mean? Sure, the boys can actually dominate the gym time and we can get the leftovers. I'm gonna leave school with no debt, which 100% blessing. But watching these young women, it is so inspiring to be both grateful and expect and demand more. I think this attitude of happy to be here, even now on the media side, you don't go to, maybe in the South sometimes if they're just Southern teams, but you don't really go to a NBA or men's college basketball press conference and there's thank yous at the end. the way that women are like, thanks for coming, thanks for telling our stories. And so now, the audacity, frankly, of this generation of athlete is incredible. It is right on time. They are owning every part of who they are, both on and off the court. And I often get asked, what do you enjoy covering more? Women's basketball has my heart. It's the reason that I am able to do what I do. But I would say it's very different. And anytime there's a bigger issue outside of the final score, women are jumping to the forefront, whether they want to or not, because their existence is so intersectional. And so it's been incredible to help amplify those voices and keep pushing. I've been on First Take now however many times, and I can vividly recount still the times that women's sports have come up. And it's cool to be able to educate that audience, and of course you gotta parse it out, because these folks are new. And then, to your point, and to the question you just talked with Susie, it's also super dope to do an NBA or WNBA countdown, and then hop on Twitter, and fans want more. Like, where can we get the next layer of this? And so I'm excited to be a part of the push as women's sports continues to grow.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to get into the fact that the engagement in women's sports is actually higher on social media than most male athletes. But Julie, I want to talk to you. I know one of the things in the report was that the key to getting more coverage is more pro sports for women, which includes expansion, which includes more investment in other countries in their women's sports. But I think that when it comes to expansion, women's sports fans are extremely educated, and you hear them say it all the time. They're like, we need expansion, and everybody doesn't always have the talking point, but the truth is some people who are naysayers like to say, oh, well, why do you need expansion if these teams need love, or you need more coverage? And more coverage comes from expansion. You've expanded a team in the NWSL, Angel City. It is an incredible environment to be in.
So fun, yes.
I can't say enough about going there. I would go there every Saturday if I could, and being amongst brilliant women, top to bottom, up at the bar at the top to the seats down there to on the field. And what you guys built with Fan First and Marketing First, can you talk a little bit about that and how that's affected the media coverage and the hurdles that you've had as well?
Yeah, thank you. And it's such a privilege to be on the stage with you. I'm already inspired and frustrated and angry, and I have all these sort of thoughts going through my head, because what you all talked about is
we're here for you.
Step into we have to step into our power. We have to step into our sport. We have to step into and get people to follow us, to understand that everybody watches women's sports.
Yep.
And as you were all saying that, I was both inspired and also incredibly frustrated, because you don't have to step people into men's sports.
That part.
Right? And so with Angel City, I think intentionally we didn't step you into Angel City. We didn't bring you along, right? What we said from day one is people watch women's sports, people attend women's games, people want to spend money on women's teams, and we are going to give you the opportunity to do that unapologetically. We are not going to give you a little bit, hope that you come, give you a little bit more, hope that you come. We're going to give you all of it, and we know you're going to show up. And that was a very different way to approach women's sports, because the old way wasn't working. Because just a little bit doesn't work. If I discount the price of the ticket, if I price it so low that you want to come, you're going to come. Well, the flip side is, if you price it so low, you're devaluing the actual product. You're devaluing the athlete. And if you price it so low, and I have a headache, or my kid's tired, or my kid's being annoying, we just won't go, right? Because it's not that much of your wallet. So for us, it was we are going to value the product, we're going to value the team, we're going to create an experience that's a FOMO that you have to come to. So despite the fact that it's LA, and there's the beach, and the mountains, and the hiking trails, and the movies, and 11 other professional sporting teams that are professional, and USC and UCLA, we said, no, you're going to want to come to an Angel City match more than anything else. And we wanted to really be that example for others to follow. When we started Angel City, there was no playbook. There was no team in sports that was female-founded. Karen Nortman, Natalie Portman, myself, female-founded, majority female-owned, and majority female-run. And so we were different from the beginning. That, coupled with the fact that we were going to invest in our community, our team, our products, and our players, was unique, all to lead with purpose, right? Our ultimate goal is to drive to equity, using sport to bend that curve. Because of our success, because we were so unapologetic about being loud and building this attention and awareness, getting 4 sold-out games our first year, 5 our second, highest sponsorship revenue, highest ticketing revenue, highest fan engagement, highest brand awareness, highest unearned brand awareness, it drove expansion.
Highest valuation.
Highest valuation. Of any women's sport in the world. Sportico quoted us at 180, and they're close.
Come on, y'all, don't do that.
That's $80 million, right, in our first year. And so, but doing it the right way is was inspiring to others during our expansion process. So, the NWSL is now entering its 12th year. We entered in its 8th year with another team, San Diego. Paid single-digit millions for our expansion
I was just
rights.
going to say, make sure you let them know what that expansion fee was
Very
by comparison.
single digits expansion rights. Last year, 2 new teams came into the market. Bay FC, which is up in San Francisco, and Boston right here. So in 2 years, you can go to a game in Boston.
Okay.
They paid each $53 million.
Ooh, run it up then, Julie. Run it up.
We're talking about when you see what's possible, right? When you see the opportunity, people are then going to value the opportunity and pay for it. And we have our 16th team that we're in the market right now selling the expansion rights so they can join Boston in 2026. But sometimes it's like taking that leap of faith and showing what is actually possible to bring everyone along faster.
When it comes to the valuation and then also bringing in brand partners, bringing in media partners, when we've always, I don't even know if you can say sold men's sports, because I feel like men's sports were given the platform as opposed to women's sports that were almost devalued always until we demanded the platform. But when it comes to that, I think I wanted to ask you, how would you say that pitching women athletes in women's sports is a different angle than men's sports altogether?
I think that's a complicated answer in that men's sports have had decades, if not a century and more, on women's sports. And I would say that women's sports in the past 5 years, even over a pandemic, which really, as devastating as that was globally, actually really showcased and highlighted the ingenuity and innovation that is within women's sports, with the first, virtual draft, with a Wubble that was pushing for social justice, with the first play in an NWSL bubble. So, as we breathlessly have said, women's sports is a value, watch us, watch us, watch us, watch us, all of a sudden people are saying, okay, we're watching and we're starting to invest. And it's like the women's sports industry is like, oh, now we have to start to actually just do what we've always been doing and keep doing the hard work, but we still are held to a standard that is not the same as men's sport because they have had the longest runway on us. So invest in women's sports as if it's an investment, as if it's a startup. Hold it as if it's a business and hold everybody to those KPIs, but give it a little bit of breathing room here. It takes a long time. I mean, the success that Julie and Angel City has had is not normal. And it is very specific to that market, that moment in time, that dynamic leadership group, et cetera. And you can look at the other teams within the league to exactly point to that statement. Brands are more interested. It takes certainly more coverage and visibility for more fans to be involved. At the end of the day, everyone wants what's in the fan's pocket, and the most powerful fan, men's or women's sports, are women. They are driving the economy. They are going to own 2/3 of the wealth in this economy by 2030. And so if we're not really paying attention as to how to captivate her and capitalize on her engagement, then I think we're missing the point, regardless of whether you're in men's or women's sports. So it's complicated because there's different spokes around the ecosystem that you have to start to pay attention to. There are sponsorship deals that need to be higher, but those have to be valued on how many eyeballs are on it, and that has to be valued on how many people are attending, and that has to be valued on how good the product is on the field. And by the way, can anyone produce merchandise, please? Like actual real merchandise so we can wear our fandom and be like, I am proud to be a member of this club. So if we just start as an ecosystem to invest there, we will see it. But wow, is it exhausting sometimes. But we're up to 16%. There's all sorts of ways to see the increases. And I think that's what keeps so many of us in this industry buoyed by the success. When we hear $181 million valuation, we're like, yeah, go team. So
if I can do one
complicated
thing,
answer.
Increase merchandise. That's like some little thing in the back of my head that I'm like, that is.
T-shirts.
I did not outfit Monica, but I might have. I want to get back to the engagement versus reach.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe spoke on a panel, and they hit on this too. But women's sports, like we've said, and women athletes, they might have a smaller following, but in terms of engagement, it's twice that of men's.
Yes.
And we see that every single day. I'll say, I come from much of a WNBA lens, but that is an audience that can't be satiated enough. Like you could just keep giving it and they're gonna keep buying, they're gonna keep consuming. Can you talk about that and taking that number to marketers, taking that number to brands? You're seeing it at ESPN, I'm sure, how you're taking those numbers and selling it into the whole of the brand?
Well, I'll talk about it from the athlete perspective first. We did a report with RBC last year looking at what is the value of a woman athlete. And we looked at that in two kind of main ways. One was like, actually what were they making in comparison to their male counterparts? And so we looked at, we represent a lot of athletes, men and women. RBC has a lot of male and, men and women athletes that they, I guess, manage their money or something, I don't know. And so we looked at our books, their books, obviously all anonymized, and then we looked at what was available out in the Google. And what we came back with was that men make 21 times what women make on the field of play. Okay, not shocking, but depressing. What that means is that women athletes have to make 82% of their income off the field of play. So like imagine going to your job for 50 hours a week and then being told you have to actually go make 82% of your living doing something else. Like, what? So that, therefore, they have a kind of a niche of going direct, and I think the pandemic actually did help in this. That kind of time where everybody was on their phone, they have this much more direct relationship with their fans, because to be a women's sports fan, you're incredibly loyal. You have to figure out where to watch it, how to find a shirt to wear, how to, da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's like they're much more in-depth and in touch with us. What that does is that leads to higher visibility, trustworthiness, inspiration, like all these kind of traits that women athletes are seen for, which also then drives, higher purchase intent, higher brand awareness, et cetera. So the net is just invest in women athletes. Like if you are a brand out there and you're thinking about how do I do this, center your whole thing around athletes, and then also invest in the teams.
And it's the value of the athlete that drives the team. Like when we were building Angel City, we thought about fans very differently.
Yes.
It used to be you follow a sport. I always use baseball. I love baseball. I live in New York. I'm a Brooklyn Dodger. Because I'm a Brooklyn Dodger, I love Babe Ruth, right? Babe Ruth goes to Boston, the Red Sox. I hate Babe Ruth, but I'm still a Brooklyn Dodger, and I have a new favorite player. It's not the way it is today. It's not the way it is for my generation, let alone my kids. I follow players. I love Kristen Press. She plays on the U.S. Women's National Team. I love Kristen Press. Kristen Press goes to Angel City. I love Angel City. And now I'm following all of women's soccer and all of the NWSL. So the benefit of that is instead of investing all my time and effort and promotion in one thing, which is Angel City, I have 26 players. So we spend time investing in every one of our players, getting them stories, getting them out to press, bringing them in sponsors, because their social following, their impact, their reach is so much bigger than Angel City. You multiply that by 26, they're all following Angel City. And then we incentivize them even further. So I'm entirely on the same page as you.
So invest in women athletes.
And female athletes tend to over-deliver. Disproportionately, they're getting the majority of their income from sponsorship deals, marketing deals, right? So they want to over-deliver. Historically, the barrier to entry, both for fans of women's sports and female athletes, have been so high, right? So they're going to over-deliver when they are serving a brand. Our fans are going to work harder. I did this kind of little test when I was kind of speaking to an internal group, and I said, I'm giving everyone homework. Go home, and this was last year, and I was like, go try to find a BG jersey in a 2T, right? I have a 2.5-year-old, and then come back to me. And one of my colleagues,
is toddler.
Yeah,
for those
sorry.
that don't know,
Not
little toddlers,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, mom brain right now. And I was like, come back to me and let me know how long it took you to find it. And one of my male colleagues was like, not only that, I was looking all weekend long. And I was like, that baseline, that baseline of frustration is where we live. So we're not trying to kind of like wag our finger at you. We just want you to understand where we have been now. Help us develop the infrastructure. Help us find 2T jerseys in the athletes that we want to represent. Yeah. And then watch what happens, right? We're going to continue to see engagement. We're going to continue to see fandom grow. But that's speaking to the ecosystem. That's the various kind of spokes on the wheel. And I sit in a unique position at the worldwide leader where I unequivocally need to be a bridge builder. So So the quicker that I can get people to understand our frame of mind and what we are asking for, it's not the exact same in every circumstance. It's equity. It's making our start lines a little bit closer. That's what we're working towards, and making people understand that can really influence the infrastructure, the ecosystem, and the development of it holistically.
Sorry, to that point, you know, one of the things that I was talking about earlier at a meeting is, you know, then you think about, well, what is the post-career for these athletes? Because now these athletes have to go get jobs because they don't have enough money, because they work a full-time job and then have to go make 82% of their living off the field of play. So now they have to go find out how to actually continue on in their jobs, which, okay, so do a lot of, you know, male Olympians and other male athletes, fine. But when you're looking at gathering athletes together to talk about how do you invest your money, how could you be a part of this venture thing or this, you know, investment thing? Women can't even participate in that because they don't have enough money to be a part of that. And so it's really kind of stepping back and thinking about how can we continue to be inclusive of where women are today in order to kind of help them get just farther along.
Yeah, I think that a lot of women athletes and women are inherently multifaceted because we have to do so many things. And Monica, I think you actually have a quote in your bio about that, like doing more things makes you better at everything. When it comes to women athletes, they're actually have more engagement in their storytelling too when you do give the storytelling, and so I want to get into that a little bit. When it comes to storytelling, how would you like to see an increase in that, and how do you think we give more visibility on platforms like ESPN for that storytelling?
So I've long said, as these conversations are becoming more and more prevalent, women's sports genuinely has to be water cooler material. And it's not necessarily on these athletes, because I know how great they are. A lot of them were my peers. A lot of my peers are now starting to retire. I've followed these young women as collegiate athletes, now going on to pros. But it's just got to continue to become mainstream. I think the other night I was watching the crawl on ESPN, and Cameron Brink's 20 and 20 goes across the crawl. And I can remember being in college, now granted this is 2011, but like jumping to see the crawl the one time that it went across with top 25 NCAA women's scores.
Yeah.
But now, like, even small things like the crawl, even things like if you want to go gamble on women's college basketball, you have the opportunities. And so I just think it has to continue to become more and more mainstream. And I'll be candid, internally, Caitlin Clark is up. She's marketable. She's incredible. We shared a headset last year at the Final Four. Like, it was great. But there is also like, hey, like, XYZ is also happening in women's college basketball. I mean, there's the Jujus, there's the Hannah Hidalgos. And so we have said to one another, we've said to colleagues, like, we got to keep this thing rolling. As thrilled as you are for that one, that is just the tip of the iceberg. And to me, equity with depth is when we start to make real change. And so I sometimes am so excited because in my world, there are men that genuinely consume and follow women's sports. And then you go to that dark side of Twitter and you're like, there's still a lot more work to be done in this space. But I just think it has to become general. Sports are sports.
Yeah.
I will say, I used to always click on the comments and try to resist getting into useless wars with people who say to get in the kitchen. But it's so interesting to click now and see way less of that and way more of like, she's not better than Juju. She's not, no, did you see Caitlin last night? And I'm like, okay, we've made moves.
Justine, it's crazy you made that point, because for me, like, and Sue and I had this conversation at the Final Four too. It was almost like women's basketball Twitter, just as an example, was in a weird place, but it was also this like, competitive, like knowledge-based, like shouting out different names and discussing it in the same kind of way that you have these conversations on the men's side. And not that the men's side is necessarily the bar, but like the discussion is healthy and disagreement is healthy. And that is our experience as sports fans. We are fanatics. You can't tell us nothing about our one team and we don't want to hear what you have to say. So I think for me, the more robust that I see that conversation becoming, it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
I actually love that take. So women's sports, being the coverage has been small, and then who covers it, they're like typically sometimes coming from a fan place where they're like, I want to know more about your story, but it sometimes has lacked takes. And it's funny because you're a former athlete, Sue, Candace, people I speak to all the time who are actually on the side of we need takes in women's sports, like good, bad, like takes drives water cooler discussion drives engagement, and engagement drives money.
And I think the nuance there is like, we don't want that take to be inherently misogynistic.
Right.
It can be a bad take.
Right.
Have a bad take.
Yeah.
I'm good with it. Let's debate it. I don't care what your fandom is, as long as it's, you know,
Authentic to sport.
authentic to sport being sport. And I think that's that's where we still have to make progress, right? And like people get inherently defensive when you're like, well, you got that's coming from a dicey place, right? If people are like, oh, earlier in the season when Kansas City was like not doing Kansas City things, like has to be Taylor Swift's fault, right? Yeah, but then they win the Super Bowl, so that's Taylor Swift's fault too, right? So we have to be kind of mindful of those talking points. That's why I perpetually say this, like, we have to make experts out of our experts. The more we have Stephen A, Pat McAfee, the more we have the faces of our network talking about women's sports authentically, we all win because we get to scale.
Great example, though, that this year, you guys, and tons of respect for Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser, but they flat out got a discussion wrong. About Caitlin Clark and NIL and WNBA. And I think it was a great article in response to it in USA Today's For the Win. But then, being the journalists that they are, they had to go do some research and then get it right. And so that's a show that has been on ESPN for 11 years, that runs every day at 5 or 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever it is. Like, okay, get it wrong, get it right. But it's somebody being like, oh, wait, who is this? Who do I need to find out about? And so it's healthy. Not the wrong part.
But I do think, you know, back, a couple of years ago, it was if you want a new story, change the storyteller, because it was just always through the lens of male reporters.
By men for women.
Yeah.
By men for women, because we'll let you know how you're doing. And now I think it is a little bit more that they're understanding that.
Welcome to our lives.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And our bodies. But
Ooh, child, don't do that right now.
Off there. Let's
We're not doing that right now.
You're in the great city of Boston. Let's have that conversation. Let's go.
You brought me to a point that I wanted to bring up once again, kind of back to Monica, but how important is it to have the women telling the stories be representative of the women who are playing the sport? The WNBA is one I always reference. It has all the isms, and most of women's sports honestly has all the isms, but you have a predominantly black league, predominantly queer league. You have women from every background, every city, every place, and then you have somebody sit up with one take for the 2 minutes they get and say something outlandish that's not true. How important is it to have somebody like you to sit there and tell the stories and defend the points?
It's huge. And I think it sucks that some kind of way journalism rules don't apply, right? Because whoever said XYZ outlandish take that was ridiculous is just basic journalism, probably if you got a fact wrong. Now, if you have an opinion when we're in a largely opinion-based space, that's one thing. But if you got a fact wrong, you got to be a journalist, whether it's men's, women's, or otherwise. Like, you got to get it right. I do think that there is a sensitivity there and a authentic connection that comes when you have stories being told by people that have lived similar stories. But I also, while that is important and it is why I have my job, also be genuinely curious. Like, be a journalist. Tell the story the right way and with compassion, especially if you're doing something that's bigger than just the scores. So, and we could have a larger conversation about where journalism is outside of sports, but like, get the truth, get to the truth.
we did a study a couple years ago, and I'm going to be really generalistic because I don't remember all the stats, but we did a study out of our think tank on one of our professors.
That's the first time you've ever not remembered the stats, so we'll give you a break.
Oh my gosh, I really, it's going to be a little bit.
My favorite thing is when Thayer said, we did a study.
We did.
I love it, because you know it's going to be fire. So.
Yeah, we did. It was this assistant professor who's now at UConn, but she was at UMass. And she analyzed mentions of WNBA players in the media. And, you know, I think it was something at the time, 80% of the league is black, and 80% of all the league awards went to black players, and yet black coverage of black players was like 40% of the entire basket. Why? As soon as we made that, as soon as we published that report, ESPN was the first one that called us. Your digital team called us and said, holy shit, what are we getting wrong? So kudos to them in terms of just stopping. But that's where data and insights really comes into play in terms of like, how do you actually understand the barometer of where the storytelling is going and how it's being grounded, and how do you start to adjust and tweak? Yes, it's definitely journalism. You have to be curious about it, but then you have to kind of base it in this rebounding system where you're able to hear back from what's actually replayed.
And how much does that more coverage help literally not be a fix to that issue, because a fix to that issue is not doing it, but how does more coverage help to see that there's like multiple storylines and instead of just 2 minutes for one storyline? Can you talk about like how you guys are navigating that? The Caitlin Clark effect is so valid. We see it. She has absolutely changed the landscape. But to Monica's point, there's the Hannah Hidalgos, there's the Juju Watkins, there's all of these athletes who stories are so good this season, and it sometimes feels like, did we just run out of time to tell that versus space? Because she's breaking every record, so okay, that's one, but where's the space for everybody? Does that help with more coverage, I guess?
Yeah, we got to have sharp elbows, right? We got to keep pushing. More is more. The amount of times in which I say that, I'm going to like pay myself $1 every time I say that, but like, more is more, and candidly, I think it's probably why I was hired, you know, and I'm, again, I sit in a unique position where I'm responsible for our broader women's sports strategy, and then also ESPNW, which disproportionately kind of serves female audience expansion and our female audiences. So yeah, to me, again, I've been talking about kind of core priorities and how we look ahead to what we are going to do and how we're going to continue to elevate women's sports. It's developing that ecosystem holistically, right? And I'll use a great example. Jess Smith, former head of revenue for Angel City, she recently took the role of president of Golden State's WNBA expansion team, and I have a colleague, Maria Suarez, who's responsible for SportsCenter, and I said, hey, you know, I have a great friend, she's about to be announced as the president, we should put this on SportsCenter. She's like, absolutely, it's news. Yeah. And yes, she's a true co-conspirator. She knows it's representative of more, but she met me with this is news. So you need partners who recognize where we are headed, and we would cover that if it was in the NBA. So we're going to cover that because it's WNBA news. So I think we're starting to make, you know, small optimizations. Of course, we holistically see the opportunity, but I think, again, I mentioned myself being a bridge builder, and I got this wrong when I started at ESPN, so I'll call myself out. I was like, you know, is every room, am I going to kind of have to push and pull? And I was wrong. I would say disproportionately, there are people who have been advocates and hard workers in women's sports long before I have been there, long before I was in this industry. So I feel like we're incredibly well positioned to kind of continue to recognize and take advantage of the business opportunity and serve fans. So again, like I got that wrong. So fans of women's sports should feel good about directionally where we are headed. And yeah, you're going to see more of it. We need to talk about Juju. We need to talk about Kiki. You know, we're of course going to cover Caitlin. Tomorrow we'll have the first ever women's college game day at a game that is not on ESPN's air. And one of my colleagues said, it's too big not to be there. And, you know, I kept my mouth shut. Yeah, I don't have to say anything in that room, you know?
That's so cool.
What's the game?
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Iowa, Ohio State?
Oh, girl.
Like Monica!
Listen, this year's been crazy. Sorry, guys. Just to be honest. I'll turn it on, though.
You have that other game you're covering and studying for.
I'll give Susie some props, though, because so with the NWSL, the last couple of years, we had a media rights deal that was underwater. We lost money, right? This past year, we announced a new 4-year deal for $240 million, where the NWSL is going to be aired on ESPN and ABC, in addition to some other channels. But the point is, ESPN wasn't at the table and came back to the table to broadcast, you know, it's like every Sunday night game is now going to be on ESPN. And that's important. That's them literally starting to lean in to make a real difference. When our final game of the season last year, Sydney LaRue, who's absolutely incredible, made a bicycle kick, which is when you like flip behind you.
It was amazing.
Can you show us?
Yeah.
Please demonstrate.
In the heels.
It was absolutely incredible, and it made SportsCenter top 10, as it should have.
Yeah, should.
Right? So you're definitely making a difference, so thank you.
Oh, I appreciate
I mean, and as proud as we are for the work we're doing at ESPN, like candidly, we're sitting at the Final Four last year, and Don Staley's like, we need more partners. Like, the same way discussion, debate, and the water cooler creates momentum, like so does marketing partners jockeying, TV partners jockeying, people trying to get a piece of this pie. And Elle Duncan says it all the time, and I'm sure Thayer will support that the numbers bear it out. Like, this is becoming good business. It's not like, woo, we're in for this social movement, hear women roar. Like, yes, she can. Like, dog, get in where you fit in and get this money. Stop playing.
Look, so we have, at the NWSL, I think we have the largest sponsorship revenue of any women's team, period. And part of that is because our pitch is so incredibly different. We've tried to find partners that are values aligned, that want to have a positive impact in our community, that want to leverage and lean into the sport, and we activate for the entire year. We don't just activate for our games. And we go and pitch sponsors, and they say, like, why should we support women's sports? To me, and I've told this to Thayer, like, there are 3 reasons to support women's sports. That is a slam dunk for anybody that is truly wanting to make a value-based, financial-based decision. 1, the value of the asset that you are going to get for the women's team is going to be less than the men's team. That is just a reality today. You might spend $2 million for the front of kit for a women's soccer team. That would be $7 million for a men's team, right? We're going to get there, and $2 million is not nothing, but apples to apples, you're going to spend less money. That's one reason. The second reason is you're going to get greater share of voice, which is exactly what you're talking about. If you go support a men's team or a men's league, you are one of 20, you're one of 50. We had the U.S. Women's Tennis Association women here yesterday. They have 1,100 partners. 1,100 partners. So when you support women's sports, you're going to be one of a few. So you get much greater share of voice. And the last thing, which is so important, which we've all been talking about, is you get this positive brand halo from supporting women's sports. If you become a new sponsor of a men's team or a men's league, nobody cares. It's not going to make ESPN news. But if you become a new multi-million-dollar partner for a women's team or a women's league, it's going to become news, and it's important. And by leading with those sort of values and with that value proposition, at least at Angel City, we have sponsors that have never supported sports before. We have sponsors that have never supported women's sports before, and we've had renewals of partners that say we're only supporting women's sports moving forward because the impact is so much greater and the value is so much greater. And part of it is just telling the story differently in the room, because if we're only going to be measured by reach and frequency and zip code and how many people come, you're missing the whole point. You're like not skating to where the puck is. And there's more examples than just Angel City about the value you can get supporting women's sports.
And the thing that we try to do from the collective is we try to create tools, and this is really what I would say to the students out there, like, there are so many ways that we need help in women's sports to figure out how to measure KPIs and measure delivery of success on things, because it can't just be around, we'll never win if it's just in comparison to apples to oranges or apples to apples on men's sports. So we spend a lot of time thinking about, like, there is a premium to be a fan today of women's sports. These women's clubs should be given more value around the momentum of fandom, the momentum of that particular team in that particular market with those particular players in this particular ecosystem at this particular time. There should be plus ups and premiums to that, which normally would never be counted for in our model. And so that's the type of stuff that we constantly go back and say, hold on a second, there's a lot of noise going on here. You're getting in while the going is good, and you're getting a great deal, and you're getting these great fans and these great players, et cetera. So it just takes the...
And I think, not to mention actual returns, if you're talking about investing money, even if it's you're investing for a much lower dollar, you're talking about 50% returns, not one. You buy a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar NFL team and you sell it tomorrow, sure, you might sell it for $2 billion, but you're making like percentages. You could turn around a women's sport. I mean, look at the valuation of Angel City in how many years?
Hold on. It took the MLS 13 years to sell a franchise for over $50 million. It took the NWSL 11.
Yeah, it did.
That's fact.
Right? We talk about those media deals.
I don't know, Julie.
Well, to Julie's point, she was kind of alluding to, you also have to get the right people in the room, right? There is nuance to this discussion. Oftentimes people come up to me and they're like, well, what can I be doing, right? I work at a media company, right? So we're talking to a lot of media buyers. If you are just comparing CPMs, if you are just comparing scale to college football, right, that's not a good apples to apples comparison, right? You have to have the right people in the room and discuss the value of this proposition that we are discussing, right? So that might include making sure that you bring your CMO with you. That might be spending extra time with your media agency. So I'm talking to anybody that has influence in this audience, right? Talk to your media buyers. Let them know we're not necessarily just trying to get the most efficient CPM here. How are we truly developing fandom? How are we truly being part of this ecosystem growth and development? Nuance is required. That's why we often have to kind of acknowledge the fact you can't just cookie cut exactly what we do for men's sports to women's sports, because we're at a different place in our life cycle, and that's okay to acknowledge. It just requires a little bit more conversation. And I think that's kind of a takeaway. If you take anything from here and you go back into your respective areas of expertise and you kind of say, hey, this is where I can make influence when we are not in those rooms with you. This is kind of how you can make real tangible impact.
Also have women in your leadership and C-suite and in the rooms. And you could start in women's sports, because female athletes are C-suite leaders in many, many, many companies, and those voices come from experience and they matter. I think that's a big part. it's interesting. So this is just kind of a fun point, but this is a good group. We were talking before we came out about obviously women's sports being undervalued and women being undervalued. And this year alone, Monica, I was talking to you about seeing Taylor Swift go to the Chiefs games, and I said she gave them the NFL $300 million deal probably for free by showing up to all those games and increased the value of $1 billion team in a $1 billion league that they've never seen increase in how long? A woman. NBA All-Star, the best event was the three-point contest, Steph Curry and Sabrina Ionescu. I would say Jewel and Asia were everywhere. Talk a little bit about that. Like, this engagement in women's sports is actually now being taken from and engagement that women give in general is now being taken from.
Barbie just sponsored PWHL.
Yep.
Yes.
I love that.
Was it AMC who came out and said like Beyonce and Taylor Swift were exclusively responsible for all of the revenue in the fourth quarter?
I believe it. In many ways, sports is still a reflection of society at large, right? But we do have these hot button moments where it's like undeniable the power of women in terms of branding and opportunity. I think the other thing that is cool for me as a broadcaster and being in it, the people that are taking issue and are resistant to the progress of women's sports are not elite level male athletes. Like, it's just not. There is a respect, athlete to athlete, exclude gender, right? And so I think you see that in the way that the NBA players celebrate the WNBA players. Sabrina said it that night. Like, if you can shoot, you can shoot. Man, woman, otherwise, right? And I think that's so important. Unfortunately, folks making decisions with the dollars and viewership always don't take the same approach as those men. But if you want to see the respect that female athletes, women athletes get, look at the way that their male counterparts treat them, because they understand the commitments that they have made and probably have more respect for them because you add the addition of women wanting to be moms. Like, there's so many things to the layers of what they do and who they are. So it was, All-Star Weekend was amazing. And the branding power of women, it's out there and people got to get in. Like, the money is there. It's not even just about a pat on the back.
Mm-hmm. We have so many things that we aren't going to be able to get to, but I want to hit on one that this whole group is extremely passionate about and is also very important. And when you're talking about the coverage of women's sports and the growth, grassroots. A couple of things we talked about backstage was actually the growth of women's flag football and girls flag football. Also, the World Cup and what we saw there, 12 new teams at the World Cup. Jamaica made it off willpower alone, I think. I just want whoever wants to take it, talk a little bit about the importance of grassroots in this country and other countries for women's sports to take these platforms and go and make the whole.
I'm setting up there right here because she's got a great story to share.
Well, look, I mean, there's all the data is out there that girls drop off around 13, 14. A lot of girls drop out of sports for a variety of reasons, everything from I don't have the appropriate equipment to I can't get there to boys are more interesting to I have to work for a living to help support the family, whatever the things are. What is we were talking backstage, what's the real differentiator for the U.S. right now, and this is a big thing that we're thinking about at the collective, is like, if the U.S. is such literally a free market, like this year alone, you'll have 2 volleyball leagues starting. Like, I could today be like, I'm going to start a league that's, a professional women's, cornhole league, and nobody would stop me. There's no government body that would be like, sorry, we're the governing agency for cornhole for ladies. In most other, you laugh, but like in every other country, there are governing bodies that are like, sorry, you can't do that. Like, we're the cornhole people. You have to get in line with us. So the difference today is that Title IX exists, and as unfair as that is, still as non-enforced as it is across many, many universities in this country, it has been such an equalizer in many ways for women, in that it gives us through 3 different divisions the ability to perform at a really elite level athletically and academically, which then also is supported by this $15 billion travel industry that is youth that you're seeing out at this very center today with all these girls here playing volleyball. That is unlike any other country. No other country has this law that says you have to fund your stuff equally for women and men, which if we don't start to push and work across everybody in this ecosystem in the United States to talk to our international counterparts about walking in to their policymakers and saying, please, as a group of leaders within women's sports and women's interested parties in girls in sport, please start to invest in women equally and girls equally, then we will start to see a massive disparity, I believe, in the state of competition as women's sports continues to evolve. So as Jamaica was, there were 12 new entrants into the World Cup this year, which was amazing. FIFA allowed 12 new entrants. Not many of them had a lot of country support before they were allowed into the tournament. And Jamaica really did a great job and kind of went there by sheer will, I think. If CONCACAF continues to invest and Jamaica continues to invest, how far can that country go? How far can those women go? And what will be the economic benefits be for that country? What will the societal benefits be for that country? So there's a lot of big things that sports can solve for that we need to do a lot more research on that will trickle back down into grassroots. It's just super important. Educate girls and give them the chance to create, whether that's play, theater, music, sports, whatever it is.
I think the Matildas were a pretty incredible example in Australia at the World Cup. At one point, don't quote these numbers, but I think they said 70 to 80% of the country was watching the games in some form or another on a channel or at a watch party. And I mean, it was everywhere. We were there, and it was just yellow jerseys on every kid, every person across the entire country.
Not just little girls, every kid,
everybody.
right?
I mean, private boys' school lined up all in Matilda jerseys. So I thought that was, that was one of the coolest sporting experiences I've seen. We have so little time left. I want to get to at least one question from the audience, and it's actually something I wanted to hit on anyway, which was what the long-term implications are of increased media coverage investment in women's sports for gender equity, social change. As we know, sports impact culture, culture impacts change, women in sports particularly. Monica, there was a question for you. You mentioned that women's athlete existence is inherently intersectional. How do each of you consider intersectionality, diversity in supporting athletes?
It's inherent, right? It's inherent. I think, you quoted WNBA is over 80% black and brown women. I think it's over 30%, I might be low, LGBTQ plus individuals. And because it is a group predominantly made up of those who are marginalized, our lived experience every day is inherently diverse in nature. We have to be cognizant of other things, be it, do we want to be a professional athlete and a mom, right? Are we in states, say someone gets drafted and women's health care is not a guarantee in that state. How are we have to have that conversation. We saw that during the Wubble, what the Atlanta Dream, how they affected a local election, which had national implications. We have to tell those stories. It's inherent to our lived experience. And candidly, it's one of my, again, I've set a lot of core priorities, but I'm fortunate to sit alongside my colleagues at Anscape. How are ESPNW and Anscape going to work more collaboratively to make sure that we are talking about lived experience, culture, lifestyle, and sport, all in the same talking point? So I won't take all of the time, but incredibly important and incredibly inherent to our lived experience as women and those who identify as women.
Agree completely, and I would say at the collective, we spend a lot of time looking at our own ecosystem of the kind of broader network that we have, and what is the makeup of that, and how do we spend our own bandwidth and time and resources to cultivate a more diverse population within the business of sport, music, and entertainment? How do we help support and educate male agents on what it's like to actually represent women? Because with the proliferation of and rise of women's sports, you have all these male agents who are like, perfect, I'm in. You're like, have you talked to them about their menstrual cycles? And you see their eyes roll back in their head. And they're, have you talked about
the blue thing on the commercial?
Yeah. You're like, have you talked about fertility? And have you talked about freezing their eggs? And they're like, oh, this is part of being a woman. And it's the biggest choice a woman has, is whether to have a baby or not. And you got to talk to them about it. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the ecosystem in which we live and how we're actually participating in cultivating more diversity in literally everything we produce.
I'm gonna go back to the journalistic piece of it. Listen, get it right. Listen, ask questions, be respectful, get it right. For me as a broadcaster, there are a few players in WNBA that use they, them pronouns. Get the pronouns right on the broadcast. There are obviously places where I align as a black woman in my experience, but whether you look like the people you're covering or not, be a journalist. Listen, ask questions, be respectful, and try to get it right.
Pronounce their names right.
That part.
Yeah, we talk a lot about see it, be it, right? So We're 3 female founders. We're a majority female-owned team. We're a majority female-run team, right? So that's different. And then we we open source our results. I mean, look at our results. So we did something, we built it a totally different way, and oh my God, we're having outsized returns. So there's more than one way to build it, to have diversity of thought, to have diversity of experience, actually can drive financial results as much as it can drive community impact, and that's what we're showing.
We're out of time. I kid you not, I think we could do another hour on so many of these amazing things, but I just want to thank all of you for your brilliance. I take it in every single day working amongst you in one way or another. And I want to thank all of you for listening, and I hope that, everybody has said things that have left an impact in where you're going to take this and how you're going to take it out in the world. If anybody else wants to end on anything, by all means.
Good job, Justine.
Yeah.